Who in this draft class checks all the boxes for the Green Bay Packers, at least at the positions we think they need the most? Maybe a smaller number than you realize.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I know that the threshold talk is not for everybody. And that's okay, because we're not going to dive into all the minutia of, oh, well, they like 34-inch arms on their offensive tackle, which, by the way, they don't. But we're not gonna cite chapter and verse all the stuff about the ways in which the Packers have these preferences. But I wrote a piece yesterday for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, about the cleanest fits in this draft for the Packers at need positions. And I gave 3 names, and I'm not going to go through it. You can go read it. But what struck me as I did the prep for it was how few names I could come up with. How few players actually check all the boxes. And I was reminded that it is unfortunately the case that these teams, maybe 300 players will get drafted, but the average NFL team does not have anywhere close to 300 names on their draft board. They just don't. It's more likely 100, 120, whether it's scheme fit, athletic testing, or off-field concerns, injuries. Players are just not going to be on the board for one reason or another. And you might have 120 guys and 80 get drafted, or 100 get drafted, and then the rest you have to try and scramble and get your UDFAs. I know that there is this perception that, oh, the Packers, they care too much about this stuff. To a point, I understand it. But it is a way to eliminate outliers. And I believe it was Bill Parcells who said, if you start making exceptions and taking outliers, you wind up with a team full of outliers. And that's not to say that the Packers don't make exceptions. They generally do not draft 330-pound men. Ted Thompson drafted B.J. Raji in the top 10. They generally don't draft short corners. They drafted Jair Alexander in the first round in the top 20, traded back up to get Jair Alexander. So it's not to say that they don't do it, but I was trying to find, okay, who checks every box? And what's crazy is if you look at the top 100, and I use the Athletic Index board. So this is an attempt to get the general vibes of where the stock of these players are based on the media narratives. And the tail does wag the dog. The tail does wag the dog on this a little bit. I don't know why that came out of my mouth. Because Daniel Jeremiah, Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, Dane Brugler, they are incorporating what they're hearing from teams into their player evaluations, their top hundreds, all that stuff. So that's part of how this all shakes out. When you look at that top 100 and the consensus, and I looked at corners, I looked at receivers, I looked at pass rushers. If you want, okay, this guy is the right height, the right weight, the right level of athlete, the right body dimensions at edge, on the edge. We don't have a lot of testing, unfortunately. We're still waiting on some, like they'll be in the next couple days. There'll be more pro days. But there, presumably some was done that we don't know about. If the Packers want someone's testing, they can bring them in. Presumably they know what Derek Harmon's 3-cone is, even though, or something close to it, even though we don't have that number. But remember, the Packers have not, in the Brian Gutekunst era, taken a first-round player. Have not taken a first-round player without a complete enough athletic profile that they qualified for relative athletic score. Even in COVID, like Jordan Love had testing. We knew what his testing numbers were. So with that in mind, Landon Jackson, the edge rusher from Arkansas, 13 sacks the last 2 seasons, 6.5 each of the last 2 seasons. I think it was 2 years ago. Had a 3-sack day against Jalen Milroe. Absolutely beat the crap out of Alabama. Was like very much the Edgerrin Cooper tape of like, if you want to make the case for this guy as a first-round pick, turn on that tape. Landon Jackson feels like the kind of guy the Packers could take at 23 and everyone goes, wait a second, what? And it's because he's got the body type. He's got the size. And he's got the athleticism. He's got long arms. And then he came back at his pro day after blowing up the combine with his jumps and his 40 time at 6'5", 6'6", almost 6'6", 260, jumping 40 inches. I mean, crazy numbers. And had a 3-cone, which is a big deal for pass rushers, in the 81st percentile. If you look at the rest of this class, he's 6'5", 264, 9.88 RAS. That's it. Of the top 100 guys, he's the only player who has tested full profile and fits the kinds of players that the Packers tend to want. Mike Green has a full profile. Small. Now, maybe they make an exception. Maybe they squint. Maybe they go, that's close enough. Donovan Ezeraku, same thing. He checks all the boxes except he's small. He's undersized. So this is not to say the Packers won't make exceptions, because they have, they do, they will. But if you want the crystal clean, the clearest cut diamond, this is the diamond. And I would expect someone like Jordan Birch, his full testing profile, if we had it, would probably fit. He ran 4.6 at 280. My guess is he would check the boxes. We just don't have it. And he's not a first-round player. If we want to stay on the pass rusher tip here, at defensive tackle, I used Derek Harmon as the cleanest fit in my piece. That was more about profile and is he big enough, strong enough, fast enough, elite pass rusher at tackle. We don't have his full testing profile, but he ran fast enough to make me believe, watch the tape, that he's going to test well enough. The Packers have not drafted in the top 100 a defensive tackle below 300 pounds since Jarrell Worthy. He was 298. So if we just take that standard, TJ Sanders from South Carolina is a shade below that. He's 297, but an 8.55 relative athletic score, productive. I really like TJ Sanders as a second round player at 54. I would love it. 23 would be a little early for me. I think Landon Jackson, by the way, borderline first round player anyway. So like 23 would not be crazy. If you trade back into the 30s and draft Landon Jackson, add a day 2 pick, I think that would make a lot of sense for Green Bay, frankly. Darius Alexander is the other one. 9.72 relative athletic score, a shade under 6'4", 305 pounds, long arms. Now he's 24 and wasn't really productive at Toledo. I don't love the tape. I don't like where he's being projected right now as a sort of top 40, top 50 kind of player. I don't frankly see that on the consensus board. He's not quite that high. Pro Football Focus likes him more than that. He's 55 on the consensus board right now. Still, this is, it would make me nervous. But it makes me nervous already that this is such a small group here. I think Green Bay is going to have to gather more information if they want to find the right player here, or they just They hope Landon Jackson makes it to 54. They like TJ Sanders or Darius Alexander at 54. The problem is a lot of the guys that I'm going to name, we're going to do receivers and corners next, they kind of make the most sense at 54. Trade back? I don't know. We'll see. We'll talk about the receivers, the corners next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute tickets at unbeatable prices. Gametime Picks allows curation to make it easier for you to find better values for tickets, sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Plus, with the lowest price guarantee, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a seat in the same section and row for less. Book with a peace of mind when you use Gametime. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Receiver. This will be quick. It's Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. 6'1", 202 pounds, and ran in the 4.4s at his pro day. Even with the pro day tax, it's low 4.5s, well within the range. He didn't run a 3-cone. Packers generally like the 3-cone because it translates to route running, but he did run a short shuttle in the high 80s in terms of percentile. We know he can move laterally. Very productive. Ohio State record holder in receiving now. That's a program with some pretty dang good receivers. Now, I know he stayed an extra year, didn't have to. If you're going to say, okay, if we want a receiver who checks every box that we have questions about in the first round, he would be one of those guys and could step in right away for your team. The only question you would have is, can he play the boundary for you? I think you just he's Chris Godwin day one. But you can play Chris Godwin in 2 receiver sets. That's the thing. And so it's okay, if you think he can play the Z, and we're going to get into some of these delineations, then, I don't know, I would have no problem drafting him in the first round if I'm Green Bay at 23. Especially if I think that the value that I can get, corner, pass rusher, is there on day 2. Now, it's worth noting, if we include the guys who did not do agility testing, only qualified as size, speed, and productivity. Or in the case of Jack Besh, he did agility testing, but not the speed. Now, he doesn't quite qualify for productivity. Then the clean, full fits, like the Christian Watson level fits, because he was productive, height, weight, speed, jumps, explosive, but didn't give us the agility testing. If you just take that, then you get to include guys like Jalen Royals, guys like Jaden Higgins, Torrey Horton from Colorado State. And that's, those are, I think, useful names for the Packers on day 2 if they want to go that route. Jack Besh, Trey Harris, the not quite complete athletic profiles, but again, the whole point of this exercise is to find someone who does, in fact, check all the boxes. For the moment, that's Emeka Egbuka. Now, that's not to say the Packers won't squint and go, yeah, well, we think this guy's good enough. Someone like Jalen Noel, apparently it is Noel. He's 5'10 and change, checks every box otherwise athletically, but he's 5'10. 194, but 5'10. 5'10 and a half, but 5'10. So unless you think he can play the boundary, unless you think Jaden Reed can play the boundary, it's not a clean fit. See, this is the point. Now the question is, how married are you to the guys that are already in your building? Well, we're going to talk about that coming up in a second here. Let's do corners first. full clean, top 100 fits at corner. And I think there's like a 1 and then a 3. You got to skip 2. Trey Amos, the Ole Miss corner. And Tom McShay thinks he could sneak into round 1. I think in his last mock, he had him at 36. So just outside the first round. By consensus, he's more in that second round. He's 51st on the athletic consensus board, which means 54 is in play, or the Packers trade out of 23 into the 30s, even the high 40s, low 40s. It's so confusing. He could make sense. If they took him in the first round, I'd get it. Ran in the 4.4s. Just a really, and speaking of clean, he's a squeaky clean corner prospect. No glaring holes in his game. Just a solid boundary corner all day. Starting corner in the NFL, no doubt. You watch the tape, 6'1", 195, played against every great receiver in the SEC. Experienced player, good player, just comes in and gives you starter level cornerback play, round 2 player all day. And if you told me you thought he's got more to give with the length and the size and the athleticism, I believe you. Now the project, and this is an interesting one for me. Darian Porter from Iowa State. 6'3", 195. And the plays he does make when you watch him on tape are really nice, really smooth. He's a converted receiver, 9.99 relative athletic score. He's Kevin King. He's Kevin King. Only Kevin King played football. This guy was rotating as a super senior at Iowa State. If you think with Hobbs, with Nixon, with Valentine and Bullard, you can make this secondary right now work. Porter is that guy, especially if he's there at 87, where you feel like, hey, maybe in a year or two, this is Sam Shields, only bigger. Because the ball skills, the instincts, he's working on the instincts. There's just not a lot of reps. There's not a lot of tape to go off. Now, the other name I have to mention here is Jahdae Barron. He passes he's little but thickly built and very athletic Jair Alexander test because he's 5'10". I think he's 5'10", 6. So he's 5'10" and 6/10, 5'10" and 2/3. 5'11" is usually where Green Bay wants their guys to be, but he played at 200 pounds. Can play in the slot, can play safety, can play corner. I think he can be a boundary corner in this Packers defense. If he's there at 23, I think the Packers would think about it. I think there's 2 corners in this draft where if they're there at 23, the Packers would go, yeah. And it's Will Johnson, but we have to see Will Johnson. Will Johnson, I think, is going to run at he's going to have a personal pro day, the corner from Michigan. And if that goes well, I think he could be there at 23 for the Packers. And then there's other names, guys like Benjamin Morrison, who just didn't test. Siobhan Revel, who's coming off the ACL, just didn't test. Now, I think on day 2, you go, okay, I can make that bet. I know if you look at the tracking data, he's really fast. He's big. Maxwell Hairston is a name that I think we have to mention here. 5'11", posted a picture of him alleging that he's 193. If the Packers think he can play at that weight, then yeah, he makes sense. Now at 23, I still think you're taking a pretty big bet on that. Remember, they took a bet on Jaden Reed, who was small and underweight, but told them he could play at 195. He did, but they traded down, twice before they actually took him? So I think in the second, if he's there, they would be a little bit more comfortable with that as a size outlier. He played at 183. You're taking a gamble. That's the definition of not clean. So these are names that I think we have to keep an eye on. Now, if the Packers want to go outside of their normal, hey, we like these kinds of trades. The thing is at corner, there's still not that many other options in the top 100. Like Quincy Riley is small. Jacob Parrish checks all the athletic boxes. Incredible athlete. But he's not 5'10" and a half. He's 5'9" and a half. He's 5'9" and 6/10. That's really small. That's really small. Now, I don't think they absolutely have to come out of this draft with a high-end corner. I think they can draft a couple guys mid-round, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Because like I said, Keyshawn Nixon, Nate Hobbs, You've got Carrington Valentine. You've got Javon Bullard. I feel like you feel like that's a pretty good 4, especially if Barron is going to play, or not Barron, but Bullard is going to play a decent amount of nickel. Hobbs is going to play some nickel, but mostly outside. Keyshawn Nixon's going to be a boundary corner. Yeah, you'd like to upgrade those spots, but if you don't, this was a top 10 pass defense anyway. I think it's more important that you find a pass rusher to make life easier on those corners. The problem is there's not that many of those either. So the Packers need to hope Walter Nolan comes through and really tests well. I think that the Ole Miss Pro Day is on the 28th. Hopefully he's able to test at least a little before the draft. I still think Tyleik Williams, he got hurt running his 40. I still think he fits what the Packers would want on day 2. I don't think that would be out of the question for them. I still believe that TJ Sanders is a good fit for them. I like that one for them. We're waiting on testing from some of these other guys. Are we going to get it? Are we not? Deion Walker is a no on testing. Jordan Phillips is a maybe. 6.03 relative athletic score for him. So that's not to say that they're only going to take these high RAS guys. But I think they would rather do that. Assuming they're also good players. We have to, I feel like I have to constantly add these caveats for fans that are going, just take the good players. Yes, I know. I know. And I should have said earlier, like someone like Shamar Stewart, he would have been on this list, but he didn't do agilities. I think he would qualify. I think if he's there at 23, I certainly think he would be in consideration for the Packers. I think that's true of Donovan Izaraku too. But we don't have the full battery for him. Now we have a full enough that I think they would be okay with it. But Rashawn Gary, he has agilities. And they were really, really good for his size. Lucas Van Ness has agilities, and they were really, really good for his size. This is a tools question. We'll see how much it matters to the Packers, but I wanted to get these. There's not that many names that are just top 100, super clean fit. There's a couple corners, a receiver, an edge rusher, a defensive tackle, maybe 2 defensive tackles. There's not that many guys. Are we in for a surprise, that means? Are we in for them going off the board? It's going to be fun to watch. I know that. And if they're going to take a receiver, let's go through the options in terms of what their plan is, which we don't know. But let's try and put together some options here. That's next on Locked On Packers. So let's say the Packers have a plan at receiver. Presumably they have a plan. And they have an idea of who they want to keep and who they want to not keep and what they think that the long-term future of this receiver room looks like. We just don't happen to be privy to it. Brian Gutekunst at the Texas Pro Day, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond. They've got the Isaiah Bond meeting set up. Brian Gutekunst was at the Tedero McMillan private workout, Arizona. What are they looking for? Well, we know what body types they tend to look for. We know that they prize production for all the questions about the pass rushers that they don't really care about production. And I think that is a totally overblown issue. There are a decent amount of receivers who body type wise, like size, speed, production, if we're not looking at agilities, match. That's why I wanted to take a more focused approach here. But what do the Packers want? What do the Packers see as this room lacking? If they want to draft someone that they think is capable of being a true ball winner, X receiver, wide receiver 1, alpha. I do this every year. I say, here are the guys that I think can be that alpha X receiver. And like, I thought Chris Olave was a better receiver prospect than George Pickens and Christian Watson, but I never saw him being that alpha backside. It's 3rd and 6, win on a slant, body a corner up guy. Doesn't mean he can't be a great player. but that's just a different thing. There are 2 players in this class that qualify. Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona. Ran fast enough, produced at a high level, can win in contested situations, more than good enough vertical, great intermediate part of the field winner. And then Jaden Higgins. You guys know how I feel about Jaden Higgins. I think he can be the engine of your passing game, especially when you have Jaden Reed, who can work from the slot, if they had some speed at that Z spot, at that second receiver outside and a 2 receiver set. They need some speed there. Whether it's Christian Watson, whether it's someone they draft, whether it's Romeo Doubs. But what about that? What if they don't view Romeo Doubs as someone who is a long-term part of this program? The money is going to be too much. The Khalil Shakir deal, they're like, we don't really want to do that. So we need someone who can recreate some of that stuff, win with some route running, but not a route god, or he'd be a better player. Can win vertically, but is not a vertical killer. Can give you something after the catch if it's there, but he's not really going to do that much. Well, I mentioned Torrey Horton from Colorado State. They were teammates at Nevada. Horton moves like Romeo Doubs. It is eerie to watch. I mean, I watched him run an out, and I'm just like, did Romeo Doubs teach him how to do that? Like, is that what happened? Because it looks like Romeo Doubs out there. The movement skills, eerily similar. So if you just want to like for like, draft this guy, let Doubs walk in a year, and you've got Romeo Doubs. Like, if you think a Wicks, Doubs, Reed room with a step forward from Tucker Kraft by skill set makes sense. And I don't. I'd still like more juice in there, but if you just want to replace Doubs, he's a good option. And I think Trey Harris from Ole Miss. Now, I think you could put Trey Harris in he's going to come up in a different conversation, but I think he could fit there. He can run routes well enough, win that 3rd and 6 slant route. Right now, that's a Romeo Doubs thing. It could be a Trey Harris thing. I think he could be an X receiver, but not the guy that's going to be the engine of your team. And that's the Dontavian Wicks part. Guy he's going to get 80 targets a year, be a really good player, but it's not even about the inconsistent part. It's just like he's not the stud wide receiver 1. So I think the sort of middle road outcome for someone like Jaden Higgins is that. I also think Harris fits there. And I think Jack Besh. I think you could put Jack Besh in the job spot too, but I think Wicks from like the Puka Nacua of I'm gonna run the dig and you're gonna hit me in the middle of the field and I'm gonna take a shot. Or, it's a 3rd and 4. You're gonna throw me a little hitch and I'm gonna make it 14. Those kinds of things. Jack Besh, Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris. Trey Harris is just not fun to tackle either as Jack Besh. Now, if they want a Christian Watson replacement, Z receiver, speed, vertical. You like what you're getting from Dontavian Wicks. He can be that X receiver, isolated backside. You like Jaden Reed in the slot. And remember, if they want to drop the slot, like there's some guys in this class. I think Jalen Noel would be a great addition to this team if they think Jaden Reed can play outside, because Jaden Reed can run, Jalen Noel can run. So you're fast enough. But if you want to replace the Watson piece of this, Luther Burden is your high-end option. Round 1, he can haul ass. 4.4 speed. He can win vertically from the boundary. He can win vertically from the slot. Like, you don't want him to just be your ball winner, 3rd and 8 bucket getter. He can do some of that stuff. Some of the like Sean McVay, it's 3rd and 8, throw a tunnel screen to Robert Woods and let him go cook. They do that with Cooper Kupp too. I think you could do some of that stuff with Luther Burden. Matt LaFleur has not really shown an appetite to want to play that way. So I'm not sure that that's even something that's really available to them. And then Jalen Royals is the other guy. 6 foot, 206 pounds, 4.40, wiggle in the open field. Now, do I wish he ran routes a little bit harder when he's not the primary target? Sure. Do I wish he was MFing guys on tape as a blocker? Sure. But he can win vertically. He can create space for people underneath because he is that fast. People have to go, oh no, this guy's running at us. That's a useful thing for your offense. All right, Jason Hirschhorn, speaking of a useful thing, is going to be here tomorrow talking about the quarterbacks. He's got a piece coming out on The Leap tomorrow, what's today? Tomorrow on The Leap about the quarterbacks, the options. I really think Jalen Milroe is an option for the Packers as a Malik Willis replacement. I'm telling you. So he'll be on the show tomorrow. Follow me on all the social medias, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast, subscribe to the podcast wherever you find podcasts, subscribe on YouTube if you want to watch us. We're always there for you so you can stay locked on Packers.